All right, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, excited to jump in.
I know a lot of you listening are probably starting to think about Assessment 1, that big group presentation coming up,
Right, right.
all about those creative problem-solving strategies. And we know that can be, uh, I don't know, maybe a little daunting.
Absolutely. Yeah, and especially, working in a second language can add another layer to that.
Exactly, and that's what we're here to help with, right? We're going to take a deep dive today into those problem-solving strategies, really focusing on how to define the problem and analyze its root causes.
Yeah, that's really the core of it. And those are skills that are going to be useful, throughout your career, no matter what kind of business you end up in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we kind of jump into all the different techniques and stuff, let's talk about the bigger picture for a second. Why are structured problem-solving strategies so essential in business? What makes them more than just like a way to find any solution?
Well, they're really the backbone of creativity and innovation. It's like, if you were building a house, you wouldn't just start laying bricks without a blueprint, right?
Right.
These strategies are your blueprint. They give you that framework that can really help to guide your creative energy,
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with complex business problems.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's about having a plan, even when you're being creative. So what are some of these blueprints or strategies that we'll be looking at?
Well, we've got a great lineup for you. We're going to be looking at PDCA, how to solve it, 8 disciplines, and Kepner-Trego.
Hmm, sounds promising.
Each one offers, a slightly different way of approaching those tricky business challenges.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So let's start with PDCA. What's the kind of the main idea behind that one?
So PDCA stands for plan, do, check, act. It's a continuous cycle. So you're planning your actions, putting them into practice, evaluating the results, and then making adjustments based on what you've learned. It's like a, constantly spinning wheel, always in motion, always refining.
Okay, I like that. It's about constantly learning and improving, not just finding a quick fix and moving on.
Exactly, exactly. And that's really a key thing for assessment one as well.
Yeah.
Your focus is going to be on that initial, plan and do stage,
Yeah.
defining the problem and then figuring out why it's happening.
Got it. Laying the groundwork, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what about how to solve it? Does it really live up to that kind of straightforward name?
Well, it's actually a classic approach that was developed by George Polya. And yeah, it's all about breaking down the problem-solving process into those clear steps. You start by understanding the problem, then you devise a plan, you carry out the plan, and then finally you look back and reflect on what worked and maybe what could be improved.
Sounds pretty intuitive, but I guess even simple processes can be really powerful if you apply them the right way.
Absolutely, yeah. And just like with PDCA, your presentation for this assessment is going to focus on those first 2 stages. So understanding the problem and planning your approach.
Right, makes sense. On to the next one, 8 disciplines. Does this involve, like, assembling a team of problem-solving superheroes?
Haha, I like that. It's not quite a superhero team, but it is a very structured approach, often used in industries like manufacturing where, teamwork is really essential.
Okay.
It involves things like assembling your team, defining the problem, identifying the root cause, putting solutions in place, and even celebrating successes to, keep that team spirit high.
Wow, so it covers everything from start to finish.
Yeah, it is quite thorough.
Yeah?
For assessment one, though, you'll want to really hone in on those first 4 steps.
Yeah.
Getting your team together, planning, defining the problem, and getting to the root cause.
Perfect. And last but not least, what about Kepner-Trego? What makes this one stand out?
So, Kepner-Trego, it's also known as problem setting and decision making, and it takes a really broad approach. You start by understanding how urgent the problem is and the potential consequences if you don't do anything about it. Then it moves into problem analysis using techniques like the 5 whys, which we'll talk about later, to pinpoint that root cause. And finally, it involves choosing a solution carefully and anticipating any potential roadblocks.
So it's all about understanding that bigger picture and making informed decisions, not just jumping straight into action then.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Kepner-Trego really encourages you to think strategically and consider all the angles before you, dive into solutions.
Great. So we've now kind of had a taste of these 4 key problem-solving approaches: PDCA, how to solve it, 8 disciplines, and Kepner-Trego. Now, let's bring it back to assessment 1. Remind us what needs to be covered in our presentations.
Sure. So you'll be delivering an 8 to 12-minute presentation in groups of ideally 5. During your seminar in week 9, you'll be covering 4 key areas: the problem itself, your chosen strategy, your analysis of the problem, and the ideas you've generated for solving it.
All right. And so Let's say I've chosen my problem. I've chosen a strategy that I think feels like a good fit. What's next?
Well, that's where those techniques for defining the problem and analyzing its root causes come in. And that's really the core of your analysis section.
So it's not enough to just say what the problem is.
No, definitely not.
We need to really dig into it.
Yeah, you need to show that critical analysis. So why did you choose this problem? Why did you choose this particular strategy? And which techniques did you use to define the problem and analyze the root causes? And importantly, why did you choose those techniques?
Right. So it's all about justifying our choices and showing that deeper understanding. What if a technique that we choose just doesn't work out the way we thought it would?
That's totally fine. It happens. You just need to be prepared to explain why it didn't work. What challenges did you face? What might you do differently next time? This shows that you've really thought critically about the process.
Okay, that's reassuring to know. It's not about being perfect. It's about understanding the process and explaining our reasoning. So how do we go from that, like, vague sense of something's not right to a clearly defined problem?
That's where these specific techniques come in handy. Two popular ones are 5Ws and H and CAT-WOE.
Ooh, those sound interesting. 5 Ws and H, that sounds familiar.
It is. It's based on those classic questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And by systematically answering those questions in relation to your problem, you can really paint a detailed picture of what's going on.
Like a journalist gathering information for a story.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I see. So let's say the problem is those long wait times at the BSU cafeteria during peak hours. Using 5 Ws and H, we could ask who's affected? Students, faculty, staff. What's the issue? The long wait times, of course. When is it happening? Peak lunch hours. Where is it taking place? The BSU cafeteria. Why is it happening? Maybe not enough staff, inefficient serving processes, who knows? And how's it impacting people? Students late for class, frustration all around.
Yeah, that's a great example. You've gone from a general complaint to a much clearer understanding of what the problem is just by asking those questions.
And I love how systematic it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about CAT-DOE? That sounds a little bit more complex.
It does sound a bit more complex. CAT-DOE stands for Customers, Actors, Transformation Process, Worldview, Owner, and Environmental Constraints. And this is especially helpful for those really complex problems where you need to consider, lots of different perspectives.
All right, that does have more nuance. Can you break those elements down a little bit more?
Sure. So customers are those who benefit from the system or process you're analyzing. Actors are the people involved in making it work. The transformation process describes what happens within the system, like the inputs and outputs. Worldview is kind of the bigger picture, the context in which the problem exists. The owner is the one with the power to change the system. And environmental constraints are those external factors that the system has to consider.
Right. So if our problem is, let's say, finding affordable accommodation near BSU.
Okay.
The customers are the students who need housing. The actors are, landlords, letting agencies, student housing services. The transformation process is that whole search and acquisition of accommodation. The worldview is the housing market in the city. The owner could be like the local council or housing regulators. And environmental constraints might be things like limited land availability or rising property prices.
Brilliant. Yeah, you've grasped it perfectly. CAT-WOA really forces you to consider all those different perspectives and the context surrounding the problem.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. So we've defined the problem, but now we need to understand why it's happening in the first place. That's where root cause analysis comes in, right?
You got it. Defining the problem is really just the first step.
Right.
Root cause analysis helps us dig deeper and uncover the underlying factors that are driving the problem.
So we're playing detective now, searching for the culprit behind the crime. What tools do we have in our detective kit for root cause analysis?
Well, two powerful techniques are the 5 whys and the fishbone diagram, which is also known as the Ishikawa diagram.
5 whys sounds intriguingly simple. Tell me more.
It is simple, but it's really powerful. You literally just ask why 5 times in a row, each time digging a bit deeper into the previous answer.
So if we had a student who's constantly late for class, first, why? Because I overslept. Second, why? Because I didn't set an alarm. Third, why? Because I was up late studying. Fourth, why? Because I had a lot of assignments due. Fifth, why? Because I'm really struggling with time management. Boom. We've gone from a surface-level symptom to a potential root cause. Poor time management.
That's a brilliant example. The 5 whys can really uncover those hidden factors that are driving a problem.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls, you keep opening them up and there's another one inside.
Yeah, exactly. You keep digging deeper.
So what about the fishbone diagram? It sounds a bit more, well, fishy.
It is a visual tool that can help you map out the potential causes of a problem, and it does kind of resemble a fish skeleton, hence the name. The problem is written at the head, and those branching bones, they represent different categories of potential causes.
So what kind of categories are we talking about here?
Well, there are a few options depending on the problem. Some common ones are the 6 M's: machine, method, measurement, mother nature, man and or mind power, materials. The 8 M's, which adds management and maintenance to that list. Then there's the 7 P's: product, service, price, place, promotion, people, position, packaging. And then the 5 S's: systems, skills, suppliers, surroundings, safety.
So we brainstorm all the possible contributing factors, we organize them into these categories, and we end up with this like visual representation of the problem and its potential causes.
Exactly. Yeah. The fishbone diagram really helps you see the relationships between those potential causes and the overall problem you're trying to solve.
This is all making so much more sense now. We've got our problem-solving strategies, techniques for defining the problem, and tools for getting to the root of the issue. I'm feeling much more confident about tackling this assessment one.
That's great to hear. And remember, for your presentation, choose the problem, the strategy, and the specific techniques that really resonate with you.
Right. It's about demonstrating our understanding and making those informed choices. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's dive a little deeper into these root cause analysis techniques.
It's really interesting, actually, how these different techniques can kind of work together to give you a really, really thorough understanding of the problem.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love making those connections. Tell me more.
Well, imagine, you start with the 5 Whys, right, to kind of quickly identify a potential root cause.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can use that insight as like a starting point for your fishbone diagram, focusing on that category that seems, the most relevant.
I see. So like if our 5 Whys exploration pointed us to time management as that root cause of, students being late for class, then we could create our fishbone diagram with time management at the head.
Right.
And then explore all those branches like study habits, workload procrastination, organizational skills, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's like the 5 Whys give you that initial clue, and then the fishbone diagram helps you kind of expand on that clue, investigate all the different possibilities.
It's a dynamic duo of root cause analysis.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, you mentioned different labeling options for those fishbone diagram branches. 6 M's, 8 M's, 7 P's, 5 S's.
Right.
How do we know which one to choose? Is there like a rule of thumb?
Well, the key is to choose the framework that's most relevant to the problem you're actually analyzing, Think about the context.
Okay, so like if we were analyzing a manufacturing process, then the 6 M's or the 8 M's might be a good fit.
Right.
But if it was something like a marketing campaign, then maybe the 7 P's would be more appropriate.
Absolutely, yeah. And if it's something related to workplace safety or the environment, then the 5 S's could be the best way to go.
Okay, so it's all about choosing that framework that helps us understand the problem in the best way possible.
Yeah, and remember, you can always adapt those frameworks to your specific needs as well. It's not about, sticking rigidly to a formula. It's about using them as guides to help you think critically about the situation.
I like that. Flexibility. Okay, so let's say we've done our analysis, we've got our fishbone diagram, we've identified some potential root causes.
Okay.
Now, how do we actually present these findings in a really compelling way for assessment one? What are some tips there?
That's a great question. It's not just enough to point at a branch on the diagram and say, here's the problem.
Right.
You need to actually explain your reasoning, connect the dots for your audience.
So we need to not just say what we found, but why we think those are the root causes.
Exactly, yeah. You need to provide that evidence, that justification for your conclusions.
Right. Okay, let's say we were analyzing that declining customer satisfaction at the local cafe that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
We used our fishbone diagram, the 7 P's framework, and we identified slow service as that major factor. How would we explain that to the audience?
You could say something like, our analysis using the 7 P's framework revealed that slow service is a significant factor that is contributing to this declining customer satisfaction. We believe this is due to, and then here you would insert your specific reasons, right? Perhaps understaffing during peak hours, inefficient order-taking processes, or maybe inadequate barista training.
So we're giving that context, supporting our findings with the evidence from our analysis, and presenting a clear and logical argument.
Exactly. And remember, using these frameworks can also spark further discussion and exploration.
Oh, absolutely. So like in that cafe example, the audience might then ask, well, why is there understaffing? Is it a budget issue? Are there recruitment challenges? Is employee turnover high? Why are the order-taking processes inefficient? Is the technology outdated? Is there a lack of communication between staff?
Those are great questions.
All these things.
Yeah, engaging in that kind of dialogue shows you're really thinking deeply about the problem and you're open to exploring all the different solutions.
It's like we're turning assessment 1 into this collaborative problem-solving session, not just a presentation.
I love that idea.
And remember, many of you are doing this in your second language. Don't be afraid to, ask questions, clarify anything that you're not sure about, and just practice explaining your reasoning. Your instructors are there to help you through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. The more you practice, the more confident you're going to become.
Okay, so before we move on to the exciting part, generating those ideas for solutions, let's just quickly recap what we've covered so far in this deep dive.
Sounds good.
We've explored those 4 key problem-solving strategies: PDCA, how to solve it, 8 disciplines, and Kepner-Trego. We've looked at those techniques for defining the problem, 5 W's in H and CAT W, E. And we've even delved into those tools for root cause analysis, the 5 whys, and the fishbone diagram.
And all these skills, they're valuable beyond the classroom. They're tools you can use in your future careers, even in your personal lives.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wow.
So we've laid the groundwork, we've defined the problem, analyzed those root causes. Now it's time to unleash our creativity and start generating those brilliant ideas. And that's what we'll be focusing on in the final part of this deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive. We're ready to tackle that final stage of your Assessment 1 journey, idea generation.
Right.
So you put in all that work defining the problem, understanding the root causes.
Right.
Now it's time to shift gears a little bit and put on those creative thinking caps.
Yeah, this is where we move from analysis to brainstorming, right? Exploring all those potential solutions to the problems we've been, picking apart. It's where things get really exciting.
I'm ready. Let's unleash that creativity. But also want to make sure we're doing it effectively. What are some tools or techniques that can help us generate those brilliant ideas?
Well, there are so many great techniques out there, but for this deep dive, we'll focus on 3 that I think are especially relevant for your Assessment 1: brainstorming, Scamper, and mind mapping.
Okay, brainstorming, that's a classic. Feels like something I've been doing since, primary school.
Right.
But is there a specific way to brainstorm effectively? Any tips there?
Yeah, absolutely. The basic principle is still the same, generating as many ideas as possible, but there are some strategies that can really elevate your brainstorming sessions. First, make sure that everyone feels comfortable sharing their thoughts. No idea is too silly or too out there at this stage, right? Second, really clearly define the problem that you're tackling so everyone's on the same page. And third, encourage building on each other's ideas. That's where the real magic happens,
Yeah, like building a tower of creativity, one idea on top of the other.
Exactly. Now let's move on to Scamper. This one's designed to spark new ideas by challenging your assumptions and looking at things from a whole bunch of different angles. It's really helpful when you need that fresh perspective,
Scamper. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so it stands for substitute, combine, adapt, modify, or magnify or minify, put to other uses, eliminate, and reverse or rearrange. And each one of those prompts is there to encourage you to think differently about the problem and those potential solutions.
That's quite the list.
Yeah.
How would we use Scamper in practice, with a real problem?
Okay, remember that cafe example with the slow service? Using Scamper, we could try substituting traditional order taking with a digital kiosk system.
Okay.
Or combine ordering and payment into one single step.
Right.
We could even adapt ideas from other industries, like a queue management system from a theme park,
Wow. Yeah, I see how just running through that list can spark so many different possibilities.
Yeah, Scamper really pushes you to think outside the box and consider solutions that you might not have thought of otherwise.
Okay, I'm adding Scamper to my creative toolkit for sure. Now, what about mind mapping? I've heard of it, but I haven't really used it myself.
So mind mapping is a visual brainstorming technique, right? It's perfect for seeing the big picture and exploring those relationships between different ideas. You start by writing that central problem in the middle of the page, and then you branch out with all these related ideas using keywords, images, colors, anything to get those creative juices flowing.
So it's like creating this web of interconnected ideas, visually mapping out all the possibilities.
That's it, yeah. Mind mapping can be incredibly helpful, not just for generating ideas, but for organizing your thoughts and seeing those connections that you might have missed otherwise.
I could see how that would be really useful for planning our Assessment 1 presentation as well.
Absolutely.
It's like creating a roadmap for our ideas.
Yeah, yeah, I can help you structure the presentation and make sure there's a clear, logical flow.
Now, as we're working on generating all these ideas, do you have any other tips? Anything we should keep in mind?
I think it's really important to embrace that mindset of experimentation and iteration. Don't be afraid to try things out, see what works, what doesn't work, and then adjust your approach based on those results.
So, like, it's a scientific experiment. We form our hypothesis, we test it out, and then we refine our approach based on the data.
Exactly. Yeah. Idea generation, it's an ongoing process of exploration and refinement.
And sometimes those most unexpected ideas can lead to the most innovative solutions.
Absolutely. Yeah. The key takeaway is that you should feel empowered to try different things out, to experiment. You don't have to get it perfect on the first try.
That's good to hear. It takes the pressure off a bit. Any final thoughts for our listeners as they prepare for Assessment 1?
Well, keep in mind that the best idea isn't necessarily the most groundbreaking one, right? It's about showing that you understand the problem-solving process, you can think creatively, and you can explain your reasoning for choosing that particular solution.
It's all about showcasing those critical thinking skills and applying these techniques effectively. And remember, even if English isn't your first language, don't let that hold you back. Embrace the opportunity to really, explain your ideas and contribute to your team's success.
Yeah, use a language you have, ask for clarification when you need it, and focus on getting your thoughts across clearly.
Well said. Your ideas and perspectives are valuable, and your instructors are there to support you every step of the way. So go out there and innovate, future business leaders.
We can't wait to see what you come up with.
And that's it for this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful, and we'll see you next time. Keep those creative sparks flying.